If you thought this video was about Jinu's death, you're in the wrong place, I'm sorry.
Came at a bad time, but you just crossed the line.
Hey YouTube, it's Laura, and as many of you on the internet, I have also fell down the trap that is K-pop Demon Hunters. I have to be honest, I thought this movie was a joke, okay? I think most of us did when we hear the word K-pop Demon Hunters, because let's be honest, that is like, for example, this, if I would title this YouTube video about movie, like that's the kind of vibe that it gives off, right? I saw it came out, I just didn't really care for it as much because I was like, the fuck do you mean K-pop Demon Hunters? Like, what is that? That must be so dumb. But then it got recommended to me and I heard like a couple songs on TikTok, and then I was like, okay, you know what? Humor me. I will watch this movie. And then it blew me away. I have listened to the soundtrack ever since. All loop. That's my life right now. Anyways, welcome to this new series on this channel, which is called Spill the Tea, where we talk about movies, anime shows, or TV series, whichever you like, and learn about writing them. So today I am actually not enjoying a tasty beverage. I am enjoying my own cup of ramen, which the girls were trying to eat that in the first song. If you somehow have not heard about K-pop Demon Hunters, which is literally impossible because the entire internet has been consumed by this movie. It is a new animated movie on Netflix by Sony Animations, and it tells the story of this K-pop girl group who, besides being international pop stars, are also demon hunters, and they have to save the world from the demon king Guima. And that is basically it. They are creating this shield with their music called the Honmun, and they're supposed to seal it, but then some wacky shit happens, and I'm not gonna say any more than that. If you haven't watched the movie yet, go and do it because it genuinely is a gem. Also, if you have not seen the movie yet, then turn off this video, go watch it right now, and then come back because we are going to talk about the story in detail. There will be spoilers. As much as I could sit here and gush about this movie because it was so good, that would not do anyone any good, because one, we would be here forever, and two, you would learn nothing from that. So I want to talk about the problems I actually had this movie, because surprisingly I had some, technically two, which is underdevelopment and the course of the story. Now these two are actually interlinked, so I'm going to talk about them, but let's go into detail why. Now I do want to say two things before anybody comes for me in the comments. This is not to shade the writers, the creators of this movie in any way. I think they created a wonderful, beautiful thing, and I really hope that they do continue on creating it. This is just my opinion and how I see this movie. Second of all, I want you to understand that I love this movie. This is actually what I'm going to say is coming from a place of love and respect. I think this movie is stunning. The animation is great. The fight scenes are dynamic. The characters are very, very cute. And the message of the overall movie itself is just heartfelt and emotional and important. But the ending of this movie, I was like, huh? What happened there? Like, what's going on? I was so confused and actually disappointed about what was happening. Also have to say that it doesn't seem like I'm the only person who's thinking this. I have watched a couple other reactions on YouTube, and people who were talking about this movie were saying this, that the ending sort of just felt rushed and unexplained. The way this movie ended made zero sense to me. And I'm saying this in the sense of, we are watching a movie about K-pop singers be demon hunters, and they sold that better to me than what they did in the ending of this movie. If you are a writer, you're probably familiar with the concept of the hero's journey. This is one of the most like classic arcs that you can write into a story, but it is one of the most often used as well. Stories and movies like Star Wars, Harry Potter have utilized this storytelling method to create their stories and create their characters' arcs. They're well written, they're well liked, so that is why the hero's journey gets used over and over again. Now, if you look at K-pop Demon Hunters, you can also notice that the hero's journey is also the core of this movie, with slight variations, of course, but that is fine. That is how this storytelling method is usually utilized. There are changes, there are steps added or missing. Now Rumi is our main character who goes on this journey, and we start off with her in the ordinary world, where we learn about what these girls do and what they're about, like where she currently is standing. That is her being a K-pop singer who is also a demon hunter, and there are specific obligations. There is the call to adventure. This is where the girls have to release their golden single, because that is basically what what propels this movie forward. Rumi releases this because this is supposed to help them create the golden honeymoon. That is kind of what starts off this whole story to begin with. This is not necessarily a classic way of introducing this step because it is usually some outer force that gets them out of the ordinary world, but here Rumi actually instigates this herself. Now, the refusal of the call is the next step usually in the hero's journey, which is where Rumi loses her voice. Now, this, in my opinion, once again, is an interesting take on this part of the journey because it is not really intentional of a refusal, but it is coming from Rumi herself. She is denying herself her being, basically. She is trying to hide herself, and there is a certain shame that comes with her being part demon unknowingly, but she is refusing the call. She is refusing to complete the honeymoon. The next part of the hero's journey is where the archetypes kind of come in, and that is meeting of the mentor. It is very interesting to me that in this movie there are actually two mentors. There is Celine and then there is Jinu, and both of them are very different mentor figures. Now, archetypes are basically these character types that have been used over and over again. There are many of them, including the hero, the villain, the antagonist, the mentor, wizard. Now we came to the part where we can use these kind of interchangeably. So you might think that one person is a mentor, but they are actually also an antagonist, like in this case. That actually creates a very interesting conflict. Because, for example, in Jinu's case, he is the antagonist of the story. I don't want to say villain because that is not really true in my opinion, but he is also the one that shows Rumi the truth of how she should be, how she should live her life. She accepts herself because of him, and he kind of shows her like how to defeat them in the end, basically. Like, everything that happens in the movie is kind of Jinu's fault. He was like not the best antagonist in that sense. Like, he was like his own undoing. But there is a very classic crossing the threshold and allies, enemies, and tests. I think that is the next step, which is basically the portion of the movie where Rumi starts engaging with Jinu more and more often, but then also the girls are trying to defeat the demons in their town while also trying to take down the Saja boys, which obviously is a big thing. I haven't tried this type, so I'm not sure. Okay, that is very nice. And it is also so hot. So then we have this thing called approaching the innermost cave, which is when we're kind of coming up onto the big fight, the face-off with the enemy, which here is the Saj boys, and this part is the idol awards, basically, and everything leading up to that. Now, the ordeal is like the first fight with the enemy, which is usually ending in the heroes defeated. Not completely, but it is kind of a setback usually in the story, which here is obviously the Idol Awards, where the demons sing with Rumi and everything about her past and her being is discovered by the girls. Up until this point, it was so good. And then from this point on, this movie just fell apart for me. I'm sorry. I still enjoyed it, and it's still a great movie, but I just thought that from here on, it made zero sense. Yeah, I am burning myself with that. I feel like they had these like great ideas, good concepts on how to continue, and the ending actually reflects that. Like, how the final fight happened actually gives a very good indication and understanding on how this was going. But the way we get there is just so not right. There are 4 more steps left in the hero's journey, which is like the first one is seizing the sword, which is where Rumi confronts Celine and she has a meltdown, and then the rest of the 3 are like kind of regarding the big fight with Guima, and that is what happens like in the final concert. Like, those are understandable, but it's the seizing the sword that makes no sense to me. The reason I felt like this made 0 sense to me was probably because the seizing the sword part just didn't happen. Like, it wasn't there. There was a place for it, but it wasn't there because the ordeal happened, and then we had the rest of the final fight, and in between where that step should have been, there was just a space. When Rumi goes to confront Celine about how she treated her in the past and how she put these pressures on her, basically, and then after that she's technically asking her to kill her, that scene was super hard. We saw how Celine wanted to protect the Honmun and wanted to protect her sister's legacy, but she actually caused the destruction of it. She contributed to that. That was a very, very impactful scene in my opinion. But also, Rumi realizes that Celine never actually loved her the way she was supposed to and never accepted her. That was also very, very sad and very emotional, and I thought that it was a very well-written moment. We also realized by watching the movie that Rumi actually learns to accept herself from the interactions with Jinu, and that is why her voice heals. So that is like a visual representation of the journey. But that's just not how this comes across, at least not to me. There is no self-acceptance here. There's no positivity. There is just anger and grief and sadness, and that is what comes across to the viewer, in my opinion. There is no resolution with Celine. When I was going to university, we also used the hero's journey structure to not only write about the entire stories, we used them to conduct the scenes as well, just with a kind of shorter version. There should be an inciting incident, there should be conflict, and there should be resolution. Those are like the crucial parts of every scene. The resolution part just never actually happened here. I do believe that they wanted, as I mentioned, this entire Jinu arc to show that Rumi accepted herself, and they wanted it to be like a clever misdirect that we would think that she wants the honeymoon to be destroyed and kind of wants to go with Guima, but then in the end she decides against it and she is actually on the good side. I think that this misfired so bad. That's just my honest opinion, and that is because the way it was set up and the way it was continued in the ordeal and the final fight. Even if we don't look at the part about Celine, the fact that the girls just accepted her and forgave her just like that. Like, she just sang a song and it was all good. And I was like, what? What do you mean? She has been lying to them their entire lives. And granted, it was because of Celine, but they don't know that. So why would they forgive her so fast? Literally, before she ran off to Celine, they were ready to attack her. Like, they had their weapons up. And like, obviously they didn't, because there was this slight hesitation. They were friends their whole lives. But their first reaction, at least Mira's, like Zoe is questionable, it was to destroy her. And then they're just like, oh, you know what? You sang a song. Very good girl. Like, what? Also, the same goes for the Celine situation. Like, Rumi has lived like this her entire life. Throughout all those years, she has believed that she was a mistake. She thought that's who she was. And while she starts to accept herself, maybe like this all just came on too quick for me. In that scene especially, I just couldn't see the self-acceptance. It felt really weird. Like, it was like, you know what? Just like this, my depression is solved. Like, it reminded me of that meme of a conversation where someone is depressed and the other person is like, have you ever thought about being happy? And then the other one is like, oh my god, my problems are solved, my depression's gone. Like, why have I not thought about that? Like, you have been like this for years, and then you're just like, you know what, self-acceptance is cool, and then everything is solved. And like, that's just not realistic, in my opinion. And like, listen, the song was great, the rest of the movie was amazing, the fight scene was well done and emotional, the concert, the Saja boys would have had my soul in like a heartbeat, but it just felt so rushed, splushed together to me. The reason I think none of this worked the way it was supposed to is because, in my opinion, this should not have been a movie, it should have been a TV series. This was done in the wrong medium. That is why it is important for writers to know your medium. Know if you're meant to create a movie, a TV series, a podcast, an animated series, a book, whichever, because this is super important to how your story will turn out. Before you come for me in the comments, I have heard the rumors that this was supposed to be a series and then Netflix made it into a movie, that it was supposed to be a 3-hour movie and then Netflix made them shorten it to what it is right now, and that is why the story is as short as it is. I have to say, I would not be surprised, because usually it is not the writer's fault if anything gets taken out of a movie. It is still, in my opinion, an important thing to discuss, especially going into the future of this movie franchise, because now the second movie is confirmed for 2028, I believe. This whole thing brings me to my second issue, which ties into with this being too short, and that is underdevelopment. This both goes for the story and for the characters that are within it. The story is a bit underdeveloped because there are tons of storylines being brought up and none of them got really explored or resolved. Same with the self-acceptance part, but there's Rumi's dad, like how did they die? Celine's past, the girls getting chosen. There was just so many things in here that just didn't get the recognition that they deserved. And like I get it that they want to make it this into a movie franchise. There's plenty of time to explore a lot of these storylines, but it still felt like they wanted to pack so many things into this movie and there was just not enough time for that at all. Especially for the characters, which to me at least was the most annoying part about this whole thing. Rumi is a well-rounded character. We learn about her a lot alongside with Jinu, which was very important, but I think both of them are very well written and we actually learned the necessary information about them to care for them enough, but no one else really got the same kind of treatment. Everybody else is just there. Zoe and Mira, for example, I would have loved to learn more about the other Demon Hunter girls because it's such a vital part of the story and a vital part of Rumi's story, but there was just nothing to work with. We got like a little bit of their backgrounds, like why they are the way they are, but that was it. Why were they chosen as the hunters? Like especially Zoe, who was living in America. There's just not much about their background, their stance on this, and like how, for example, they interacted with Celine, because Celine obviously played a huge role in Rumi's life. What was her role in the girl's life? Like, why did they accept Rumi so fast if Celine was the one mitigating them? Also, like, Celine said that if she would say that it was a trick from Grima, then they would believe her. Like, stuff like that is just like little droplets of why. We also know that Rumi was chosen as a hunter because her mom was one, and obviously that's Celine's sister. Where did Celine get these two girls from? The other reason why this affected me so much is because we don't really see their bond forming throughout their younger years. I feel like if we would have seen like little bits of their past, it would have made more sense for them to accept Rumi so willingly and so fast after this whole ordeal, because we would have seen that they genuinely are bonded and care about each other on a deeper level. I get that we see that during the film and it is there, but I just feel like for this situation, deeper connection would be necessary and needed. The same situation goes for the Saja boys, because beside Jinu, they didn't really have any characterization except for that's baby because he looks like a baby, that's abs because he has abs. I get it that it's kind of a play on the K-pop world and like how these boy bands are built up and like what bands are looking in them, but I would have actually very much enjoyed to learn more about how the Saja boys formed, like what the other guys were about, like why did they get into this beside the fact that they're demons? What was their goal? The one that is most pissing me off about besides all of these characters is Celine, because we learn practically nothing about Celine. She is one of the antagonists in the series. Once again, I wouldn't say villain because she was trying to do what she thought was good, which ended up being bad. So it was a very interesting moral segment of this whole thing. We didn't learn enough about her, in my opinion, to really understand where she was coming from. She was one of the biggest influences in Rumi's life and why she views herself the way she is, and yet didn't really get enough of that either. I've also seen a concept where she killed Rumi's mother, which I was so sad that it was not in the movie, because that would have actually made it so much more interesting. The way she interacts with Rumi, her guilt, why she treats her the way she is, it would have actually made so much sense in my opinion. But I hope that they explore that storyline in further movies because it is very interesting and it would add a lot more to her character. That is the problem with the self-acceptance part, is that we didn't really see how Celine's past affected her and how because of that she treated Rumi, but we knew that for a long time she was not really accepting her, and like she, even during that confrontation, she never did. So where is the self-acceptance really coming from? What happens to her after? If they made this into a series, I feel like we would have had enough time to explore all these storylines, get all the conflicts set up, and also make a hook for a sequel that would also have enough story material to work, because the amount of mythology energy and stories and just everything that is in this movie. It has so much potential. There's so much to work with. I think it would have been better as a series, and that is why it is very, very important and vital that if you make a story and you write a story, you know what you're writing it for, not just your audience, not just where you want to distribute it or how, but know if you're writing for a book, for a movie, for a TV series. Get to know your medium and decide which one is best for you, because that can actually be such a hindrance to your story, but also a great propeller and an anchor to make sure that it works. I did hear that the creators wanted to make 9 movies altogether from this franchise. I hope that's true. I genuinely do hope that's true. I am very, very excited for the next one, and I really hope that they explore those unresolved or mysterious parts and they tell us more about the Hunter Girls, about Celine. I'm not sure how they're going to continue on with the story, if I'm honest. I guess we'll see, and we'll meet back here in 2028. See you then. Bye.